Rimuru Tempest has come face to face with many of the horrors that inhabit this fantasy world. Destructive dragons, fire demons, demon lords, and even a massive orc army. But now he faces his greatest danger ever: super powerful magical school children. Get ready to get slimed, my friends! It's time to take a look at another episode of That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. Before I go further into my review, it's time for me to give a shameless plug into a video that I just made, my review of Dragon Ball Super Broly, the 20th Dragon Ball movie, easily the hypest of the entire series. If you want to get my thoughts on that, there will be a link for that video in the description box below. I worked really hard on that one, so make sure to check it out and share it with all your friends. But let's talk about this episode of That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, which had a number of surprises. And it's sort of like the aftermath after the battle with Charybdis, where Rimuru and the Jura Tempest Federation are having a big old party. In fact, they actually take the remains of those flying megalodon shark creatures and basically transform them into sushi. They have a big party, they get super drunk, and everybody just passes out in the streets. It's a big, glorious, ridiculous, and fun moment. But it's when Rimuru finally realizes that he's actually been shirking some of his responsibility, and a lot of that is tied to Shizu. He remembered that she was mentioning she used to be a teacher to all of these young students which were summoned from another world. And so Rimuru decides to go on a journey to find these children and to become their brand new teacher. Right off the bat, this is a very different episode of That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. So different, in fact, that it actually kind of threw me for a loop. I didn't expect that Rimuru was going to end up becoming a school teacher, and I can't wait to see how he's actually going to teach this class of rowdy students who are incredibly powerful and imbued with all sorts of magic abilities. They've been teased a little bit in the intro and in the outro of the show, and I didn't really know how they were going to work in this series, but this episode actually managed to deliver a lot for these characters, showing that they have a lot of heart, and also that they have a very depressing backstory, as we get to learn a little bit more about the reincarnations and the summons of this world, and of course the repercussions that come along with them. First, let's talk about the kingdom of Ingrassia, which is without a doubt the biggest kingdom that we've seen in the series thus far. It's absolutely massive and really beautiful. What's also really unique about this place is that it seems to have a lot of modern conveniences that actually exist in the world today, such as automatic doors and super advanced technology which borders on stuff that you would see in Star Trek. It's a little startling, and even Rimuru himself has to comment on this, being surprised to just see large window pane glass for the very first time. But when he arrives in Ingrassia, he actually decides to meet up with this brand new character who goes by the name of Yuki Kagarazaka, who just so happens to be one of the former students of Shizu, and he's now the big headmaster of this academy that goes by the name of Freedom Academy, where all of these summoned kids actually go to learn and to hopefully not blow up into a giant magic ball of dust. More on that later, but the introduction to the character of Yuki is very interesting, as just like Rimuru, he seems to be a reincarnation from Japan. In fact, he seems to have come around from the very same time period as when they meet each other for the very first time. It leads to some of the funniest moments that I've seen from the show, like the fact that both of these characters are inherently otaku. They're obsessed with anime and manga, and they discuss it at length for a very large portion of the episode, and for fans who actually get, like, a lot of the references here, I'm certain you're gonna have a big smile on your face. I know I was when they were actually not so subtly talking about the anime series Oh My Goddess. There's countless other references to anime and manga and even things that exist in the real world, and it's really fun watching Rimuru be like the master of all of this information as he tries to impress Yuki. Yuki's an interesting character too, as he also seems to be very powerful. When they first meet each other for the first time, they end up just sort of like kicking each other, which causes a massive explosion in the office, which doesn't seem to get the attention of anyone. But in a world filled with super powerful magical people, this is probably just another way of saying hello, and it was a great introduction to his character. I especially love the fact that basically Rimuru committed copyright fraud by being able to insert paper into his slime body and reproduce various forms of manga for a gift for Yuki so that he could catch up on missed time. It was a really funny moment, and it really shows that these characters have a strong connection with one another, but this is also an excuse for exposition and to learn a little bit more about these children, these summoned children. Very much like Shizu, when they come to this world, they are just little kids who are imbued with way too much magic power. So much, in fact, that they actually end up becoming somewhat unstable, and they're unable to actually live for only a couple of years. 5 years tops, to be exact. It adds a very dark element to the fact that these kids exist in this world, but it's up to Rimuru to actually try to rein in their power and maybe even possibly try and save them. I think that's pretty noble in and of itself, not to mention that they're also bringing up another brand new character who goes by the name of Hinata Sakaguchi. Now, if I had to guess, I would say that Hinata is probably that one character that Rimuru is actually fighting in the very first intro of the show. It's very implied that these two are going to have some sort of, like, rivalry or antagonistic behavior with one another, and I can't wait to see what that's all eventually going to go into, but that's not really what this entire episode is about. This episode is about the introduction to this brand new kingdom and all of these kids that Rimuru is now going to be teaching, and they finally show them off at the very end of the episode, and I love when he walks into the classroom for the very first time. One of them just immediately starts to attack him with a big, massive, powerful attack, to which Rimuru almost barely just dodges. He realizes that there's a lot of potential for these kids. They all have unique designs and interesting names and characteristics, but unfortunately we don't really get to learn much about them in this episode, which is kind of disappointing, but that's what the last couple episodes of the season, I'm sure, are going to be all about. So what's the rundown on this episode of That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime? You know, for very little happening, there were just a lot of elements about this episode that I really loved. I particularly loved, like, the first 8 minutes of this episode, which is basically just Rimuru and the Jura Forest Federation just sort of hanging out and having a big party. Like I said, the one ninja member of the Kijin actually manages to cut up one of these massive megalodon sharks into sushi, which is really fun to see. I also love just seeing the camaraderie between all of these characters, especially Gabiru and Geld, as, again, initially they were very, like, big enemies with one another. Now they're sharing drinks, patting each other on the back, and having one hell of a good time. It's also really funny that these people party so hard that they all just sort of collapse and fall asleep in the street. I don't know what that is, but it's funny. And if you wanted some more fan service of seeing a lot of the female characters in a hot spring, well, guess what? You're gonna get a lot of it in this episode. It's not overly gratuitous, but it is certainly there. They also conveniently get rid of Milim Nava for a little bit, who decides that she's going to go and consult the other demon lords to try and convince them to not attack Rimuru. I have a feeling she's probably gonna get distracted, and I did love the joke about the fact that every single one of the females in the hot spring actually told her not to get tricked. They all just repeated the same thing over and over, knowing that inevitably she probably is going to be manipulated, and like I said, I think it's kind of convenient that they got her out of there. I have a feeling it's going to lead to something pretty interesting. But what's even cooler is that Rimuru actually decides to go on this journey by himself. Actually, well, he decides to bring Ranga along, who's just sort of conveniently hanging out in his shadow for most of the episode, while everyone else stays home. Again, this is going to prove how strong they really are at working together now that the big boss is not going to be around, and I really hope that nothing bad is going to happen to his brand new town. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention that we get to see Veldora at the very end of the episode. Not like out in the dragon flesh or anything, but it is really interesting that he does react to something in the room with all of the children. This just gets me more excited to see Veldora return, as I've just been begging to see him return in the series. He's only had 2 episodes devoted to him, and he was such a striking and fun character that I'm just so anxious to see his return. What more can I say? This was a great episode of the series, which is why I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. I had no complaints with this one. It was entertaining as hell, and it's got me even more excited to see how this world is going to change and evolve as Rimuru gets another brand new position. Let's get excited for it, guys. If any of you did watch the episode, make sure to tell me what you thought about it in the comments section below, what you think about this brand new storyline, any theories or things that you hope to see. Let's just get a discussion going about this episode. And like I said, make sure to check out my Dragon Ball Super Broly review. There will be a link for that video in the description box. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay dandy, baby.